Well, hello and good day, everyone, depending on where you are in the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening. Here in the Northeast, it is evening, so I will say good evening. And tonight, we are going to be speaking about menopause and how it doesn't have to suck. And I have the delight and pleasure to be joined with our own Dr. Stephanie Nielsen. Hello, good evening. How are you today?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
I am doing very well and working through my menopause journey to where it doesn't suck.
I'm through mine and it doesn't suck. It's never been better. So there is hope.
Fantastic.
Everybody needs to know that.
Absolutely. And, it's really something that to talk about the amount of women um, who are going through menopause. It's really amazing, a statistic that I read that over 1 billion with a B
Mhm.
women worldwide are currently in perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause. And by the year 2030, that will represent around 6% of the world's entire population. Wow. I mean, when you consider that menopause, this is now like a global phenomenon. And the life phases that all women, we all deserve to embrace it with insight and control and empowerment, knowing that we can help determine this transition. So it really is amazing what the things we know now and are continuing to learn that can help empower us in that realm.
Well, I think that's what's so empowering is I didn't know anything going through it. I mean, I'd been a healthcare provider for
Mhm.
30 plus years,
Right.
and it was not something that was focused on. It was not something when I was a medical researcher that was researched. It was not something that, anybody even talked about. Maybe some of your most intimate friends would say, "Oh, I'm having a hot flash." And you're like, "Yeah, me too." But other than
Mhm.
that, we got cranky, we got fussy. Our kids being teenagers, while we were going through a change, they were going through a change. We butted heads. Um, our waist got thicker, our thighs got flabbier, but I didn't have any idea about what was going on. Now, knowing what was going on, there's a whole lot of information that we want to share tonight on how to make it not suck and how to make that transition easier.
Oh, absolutely. And we really want to reframe menopause in and of itself. We were talking about the empowerment and everything else, but really seeing it instead of seeing menopause as a decline, as like, oh, there goes my life, really to have it be more accurate, that empowering view as we shift or recalibrate the body system. Okay. It's really a chance to apply modern knowledge, genetics, hormone monitoring, personalized care to really take control. And I like to think of it, it's like upgrading your operating system on a smartphone. Menopause is a system update. With the right settings, you can unlock new features rather than old problems. I
Mhm,
mean, hey,
mhm,
so and having all that and the wisdom and experience to boot, I mean, come on.
mhm. Well, and I
So
think menopause has
mhm,
changed. We didn't
mhm,
have all of the smartphones. We didn't have
right.
the 24/7 barrage of laptops and, binge uh, watching and all the blue lights. I mean, we had a small TV.
Mhm,
Maybe my folks watched the news, maybe we watched one family thing, but then we shut it off. We were
yeah.
outside, we were running around, as a young mom, my kids were outside running around. Now there's so many environmental toxins. There's so many
Mm,
microplastics. There's so many hormone disruptors. It's a whole new ballgame. And so I think those are some things that we need to talk about is menopause has changed. And as many new changes as there are, there's also new solutions. So maybe we can go through some of the pathways of metabolism and help people also understand, are you in menopause or are you not? Is it maybe something else that's going on and you're just saying, it's got to be menopause because I feel awful. So.
Right. And that's exactly what we are going to be covering tonight. So we are going to be talking about understanding that hormone shift, what hormones are, which genes are involved, how you can leverage the information in your DNA 360, which, by the way, if you do have your DNA 360 reports, you're going to want to go to the system of hormones and fitness. Okay, so that's where you want to look. You can look in the summary report because it will give you information on your hormone profile, whether you have a risk for estrogen toxicity. It will talk about the different genes and list the information about the genes that we're going to be talking about. So that will be very useful. And you can also access your reports right on your app or on our app on your phone, The DNA Way. So if you haven't downloaded it, download it because it's great, very easily navigable, and has everything right there for you. So before we begin and dive into talking about these genes, talking about how to take control of our hormones and actually getting some actionable items in regards to those things, diet, nutrition, lifestyle, behaviors, things like that. Let's bring up the poll because I would love to see what our audience is dealing with, what stage of life they're in. So thank you, Fanny. All right. So our first question is, what stage best describes where you're at right now? And the majority of people, almost 50%, are postmenopausal, followed up by perimenopause, which is at 26%, and then into that early menopause stage. A couple of you are not sure what stage you're at, and a few others says you're here to learn for someone else for the future. Thank you so much for being here, every single one of you, for wanting to learn more. So it looks like, the majority are postmenopausal. Our second question: what's your biggest challenge during menopause? And again, we do have a clear winner: weight management or metabolism changes. So very much what you had mentioned, some of the symptoms: getting a little thicker, having those legs be a little flabbier, having to deal with having to work harder to stay in shape. That being followed up by mood changes, sleep disturbances, having those hot flashes be night sweats, wondering why you're crying for no reason, or, just being snippy at things that you're like, this shouldn't bother me, but it does. That type of thing, being on these major mood swings. So, definitely understand where that's coming from. And then we have a bit of a tie coming up with hot flashes, night sweats, bone and joint health, as well as the other. And for the other, if you could please type that in the chat, we'd love to get an idea of other aspects, other symptoms that you are dealing with. We would love to see that. All right, so our third question: how much control do you feel you have over your menopause experience? And half of you said, I'm learning, but I'm not sure what to do next. Well, I'm glad you're here because we're going to talk about those things on what to do next. Actually, not just what to do next, what to do right now. And as you move through this beautiful transition, beautiful upgrade in your life. And that is followed by that 31% said that they feel informed and proactive. Fantastic. I am so glad to hear that. And I'm sure that it is making your journey through this upgrade that much smoother. And then we have an even split at 10% saying, I feel it's just happening to me. And none, I feel overwhelmed and uncertain. So I think that this information that we're going to be going over in the webinar tonight will really help you stop feeling like a victim. Like it's just like, I don't know what's going on, to empower you, especially if you have your DNA 360 reports. You can take a look, see what you have to work with, but even more so, the symptoms, some of the testing, different things to look for that we're going to be talking about to help you navigate going, what can I do now? What can I do next? Our fourth question, are you tracking hormones or symptoms currently? And this is pretty straight across the board with that, yes, people are using a device or lab testing, that they, yes, through self-monitoring symptoms, lifestyle, and then also not yet, but they'd like to, or no, not at all. There's really a pretty even split across there. And maybe the information that we talk about tonight will encourage those who aren't doing anything to do that. And again, I would bet that there's an overlap for people who are not following or tracking their symptoms, are some people who feel like it's just happening to them. They don't really know what's going on and just are in this chaos of a life change. And our last question, what would you like most to gain from this session? And wow, here it's it's still is a pretty even split. But our number one is a better understanding of how your hormones and genes interact. And absolutely, we are going to be diving into the genes in your hormone and fitness report, how that works, how that helps to inform us practitioners, but you yourself about, hey, this is the blueprint of what I've got to work with, but realizing that your hormones and this system is very nuanced. And so really paying attention and following what your symptoms are, what you're going through, and the things that you try to help, if they are helping, if they're not, keeping track. But also other people, actionable tips. Of course, we're going to be given actionable tips to help reduce those symptoms, information about testing and personalized plans. We will be weaving that in, as well as tools and strategies for that long-term health. Again, speaking to things that we are doing that you can do right now today, as well as what comes next. So thank you so much for answering these. We really appreciate it. And also some things in the chat that people have shared for those other symptoms. So some people are dealing with vaginal atrophy, which basically in layman's terms, painful intercourse, vaginal dryness. Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that happens when our estrogen tanks, having that tissue not be as holding the mucus and being as thick as it used to be. So yeah, been there, I had that. And so definitely can sympathize with anyone who is dealing with that type of those symptoms.
However,
Yes.
there is also, and people don't generally put these two together, and neither do a lot of primary care providers, UTIs. So you may not have been a UTI woman, and all of a sudden you've had 2, 3, 4 urinary tract infections, and you're like, why am I all of a sudden getting it? It's low estrogen. So if you've noticed itchy, irritation, not even just painful intercourse, because there's a lot of people who have their get up and go is got up and gone, and they're not having intercourse. They have no interest in intercourse. And so, but if you feel itchy and irritated, or like your panties are sticking to you. That's a whole bit of the mucus is drying up, the estrogen is low. So don't just look for those overt. You could also get itchy scalp. You can have itchy skin. All of that estrogen plumps those tissues up. So if you start noticing, God, I got a spot on my back. In fact, there's a study that I read that like 26% of women going through menopause develop a spot on their back, their scapula, kind of your wing bone, and it becomes itchy. And they have found when you're going into menopause that can be possible. So know that strange itchy skin, strange itchy scalp, your unexplained urinary tract infections, and just general dis-ease with your lady parts can be a symptom of starting to go through or being in menopause or perimenopause.
Thank you for that information. And that's really good to know. So it helps to provide more of that information that you're not falling apart, in that there are things that can help you.
Mhm.
And, getting that estrogen level raised or dealing with some of these symptoms can really help with several different things, but we'll get more into that. I wanted to mention another comment that someone is having, and that is, if someone or that person, if they can't have hormone replacement therapy for some particular reason, well, they're pretty much, from their point of view, they're pretty much forced to live with the symptoms. So maybe that's something that we can discuss about having other ways outside of hormone replacement therapy that could possibly help alleviate or attenuate some of the symptoms that we generally deal with as we are going through menopause. So thank you, everyone, for sharing that information and for giving us better insight into where you're at. All right. So let's talk about the hormones. Let's talk about the genes that affect the hormones. So that way, we are giving some of that information on the foundation of, hey, what's going on, especially if you have had your DNA 360 done. Remember, you're looking in your hormones and fitness system reports. So why don't we talk about that? Would you like to start with one of the first genes when we're talking about hormone production, starting with like progesterone and looking at that pathway?
Well, I actually think I want to take one step back. A lot of
Absolutely.
women say, how do I test?
Mhm.
And I think you need to understand there's really three main ways to test. There's either blood tests, which show what is possibly available circulating. Now, just because
Mhm.
it's circulating doesn't mean your body has access to it, but it's circulating. And that's what most providers are measuring. Then you have saliva. Saliva
Mm.
goes in to the tissues. So these tend to be tissue levels. So a lot of people who follow bioidentical hormone and especially sex hormones like to use saliva. There's urine. That's one of my favorite. I combine both blood so I can see how much is available, but then I want to know the pathway it's going down. And that leads to what Dr. Barden was talking about, which is the multiple different pathways of your DNA. Your DNA shows you, do you have a pathway that's going down and is maybe causing side effects, or is causing, as what we really know they are, direct effects? And is there a way to recalibrate that? So I think one big thing that y'all need to understand is cholesterol is the mother of all your hormones. Cholesterol breaks down into pregnenolone, and then from pregnenolone, all of the hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all come from cholesterol. So let's think about this. How many people out there are on a statin? So we're suppressing your cholesterol. Well,
If you're on a statin, put 1 in the chat.
that's a great idea. Yeah. And so your doctor says, oh, your cholesterol's getting too high. We've got to suppress it. Then guess what? You start having hormone issues. You start having symptoms. So remember that there's a very small part of the population, and you can refer back to some of our cardiac webinars that talk about who actually might need to suppress cholesterol. But the problem I have as a pharmacist, who is a clinical pharmacist that actually practices clinically with patients, is every time somebody's statin lowers their cholesterol, your brain needs cholesterol, your hormones need cholesterol, and your cells to repair need cholesterol. Now I have pulled back your body's ability to repair. And when I pull back your body's ability to repair, you have more symptoms. So you do have to be really aware. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is you need to become an advocate for yourself. You have a PhD in you. You know, I used to tell my provider that I would get loose bowels 2 days before my cycle would start. And I could always tell when my cycle was going to start. And he said, that's not possible. That doesn't happen. Nobody else has that. Turns out the different prostaglandins did release, as is getting ready to release the blood from my uterus. It released, same ones released the, my bowels, and it was very predictable and it was very real. But I was gaslit that I was just crazy, that I was making things up, when in fact, then a few years later, it was proven. So if you have a PhD in you, you know your symptoms, you know your cycles. Do you chart them? Do you say 4 nights out of the week, I wake up with hot flashes? Do you chart, I've put on X number of pounds? Do you chart, I have these kind of cravings? These kind of things, as silly and simple as they sound. I used to sleep 8 hours, now I only sleep 6 hours. These will help you see a rhythm and a pattern, and they will help your providers see a rhythm and pattern and be able to look at those pathways. Now, if you have your DNA 360, phenomenal. I wish I'd had my DNA 360 when I was going through this, because I started my period late. I was 16, almost 17. And then it was about 52 when I went into menopause. But now we've got clients that at 32, 36, they're saying, I feel like something's going on. And their providers, again, gaslight them and say, you're just depressed. And they give them antidepressants rather than even checking hormones. So I want you to be able to advocate and say, I think there's something more happening here. And we want to give you some of those tools and some of the things that you can order yourself, or you can ask your providers to order, and make sure, if you have your DNA 360, which I encourage everybody to get their DNA 360. You get it one time, your DNA doesn't change. And from then on out, you've got your personal blueprint. And from that personal blueprint, you can say, oh, shoot. So I'll tell you, for me, I have estrogen dominance. I have estrogen toxicity. I have, poor environmental clearance. I have gluten intolerance. I have dairy intolerance, and I have fat intolerance. So, trying to go keto or trying to go carnivore or trying to use BHRT without that knowledge would not work, and I called myself a vegetarian, but I was a breaditarian, I was a carbitarian, I was a dairyitarian, until I found out none of that was working for me. And I was able to lose 20 pounds looking at my DNA and shifting back toward what my body was built for. I thought I had to run, so I was doing 5Ks. Turns out I'm not built to run. I'm built to lift heavy shit. So now I do. But let's get back to some of those pathways. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, speaking about those parent hormones, okay. Well, first of all, yes, we were talking about cholesterol. Cholesterol is that backbone of all of our sex hormones. And, to pregnenolone, to progesterone. And as you will see in your reports, that progesterone through the CYP17A1 gene gets converted into testosterone. So this helps with that production, that conversion. All right. And so depending on how quickly you do that, helps to determine what type of hormone profile you have. So if you convert progesterone to testosterone at an increased rate, then you will tend to have a dominant profile. So Dr. Nielsen, you said you were estrogen dominant?
I'm actually co-dominant.
Oh, you're co-dominant. Okay.
Yeah.
I happen to be estrogen dominant. So I do convert. I have a faster conversion of that CYP17A1 gene, as do you, because you have a dominant. So from there, when we have this pool of testosterone, there are different pathways that it can take. And that can also influence our phenotype, which is the way that our body morphology is, different ways that we feel while we are still in menses, still cycling and having a period, that can influence that. And then as we shift and move into menopause. So when we have that pool of testosterone, one of the pathways that it can take is it can be cleared by the UGT genes. Okay, so this is your glucuronidation. So this would be your UGT 2B17 and 2B15. Now the 2B17 is a copy number variant, so you're either going to have 0, 1, or 2. Okay, so the more that you have, the faster that clearance can occur. So again, pool of testosterone, how quickly do these androgens get cleared out to leave how much testosterone is still hanging around to go the other pathways? Another pathway is the conversion of testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, and that is with the SRD5A2 gene. So DHT, dihydrotestosterone, is 3 to 5 times more potent than testosterone itself. It's like testosterone on steroids, okay? Now, for women, obviously, we don't necessarily want to be converting a lot of testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. But, that can affect, again, morphology, different symptomologies we may experience, okay? So that's another conversion.
And this is where we get into the whole hair topic. Because if
Yes.
you have a lot of the DHT, you may experience the female pattern balding. Now, I will tell you, my grandfather was completely bald. And he used to say, and I didn't understand this at the time until I became a pharmacist and started studying hormones. He said, look, we all have the same amount of testosterone. He was talking to other men. He said, if you choose to use yours to grow hair, that's your own problem. I have better use for mine. So he was speaking to his virility, but because he converted to that DHT, he lost it. So women who have struggled with hair loss or thinning hair, there are things we can do like salpimento, like pumpkin seeds, which push it back the other direction and it'll push it, so that you don't have as much DHT, or it slows it down so that you can invigorate your hair. And, there are other peptides you can use, like some of the copper peptides that will actually stimulate more growth. And those can be used externally or internally to help regenerate hair and vitality. Because you know what? Hair can be a big part of a personality.
Oh, absolutely. And, having more of the testosterone and DHT in the system can also influence someone having cystic acne
Mhm.
and, issues thereof. So, again, Dr. Nielsen has already mentioned a few supplements and other things that can help lessen that conversion. So that way we as women are not dealing with some of those issues.
Now there
Uh,
are
yeah.
drugs and,
Mhm.
I don't like, even as a pharmacist, I don't like to advocate those drugs because with every drug comes side effects. But many of you may have known or used spironolactone. And if it's very severe, or if you want to use it short term in the beginning, spironolactone is something that can help with that. And that's something most providers are pretty comfortable working with to help you preserve the vitality and great hair and get those hormones pushed back in the other direction.
So, with this, we've talked about a few of the different pathways testosterone can take. There's still more.
But
One
wait,
of
there's more.
there is more. So there's also a matter of sensitivity of that testosterone. And this gets into the androgen receptor. So this you might find it as andro-X or AR, androgen receptor. And that X stands for it being on the X chromosome, that which we get from our mother. Okay, so there's the XY, Y being the male, X being the female. And so actually for men, because you are XY, you actually only have one of those genotypes. It's just in the reports, if you see two, well, that's just the way that it's structured for the uh, the reporting. But for a male, you'll always see the same letter. So like a CC or a TT, you'll never have a CT, where women, yes, we will, because we do have those two X chromosomes. And the fact that, we can have it being at an increased rate or a decreased rate. And basically, this is just a matter of how well testosterone is binding to that receptor, kind of like a lock and key, where the receptor is the lock, the testosterone is the key. And how well is that fitting in? How well are you being able to utilize the testosterone that you are producing? And there's also the fact that what you ask your body to give or to do, it will provide within the confines of your genetics. So, for example, I happen to be, again, estrogen dominant. I have an optimal presentation for my androgen receptor. So when I want my body to get that testosterone and to utilize it, it does it very well. But I have to do the work to have my body use that testosterone. If I want to do it a little more, for example, like in exercising. All right. So when I exercise, I can utilize that testosterone well and I can build lean muscle mass. But when I don't get the muscle mass. Will tend to gain weight more. I won't be, using up those calories, because remember, the more muscle mass you have, the more calories you burn at rest. So this is something to keep in mind on how your genes are structured and how you can leverage that. So the final pathway that testosterone can take is being converted, or what we call aromatized, into estrogen. And yes, testosterone turns into estrogen for both men and women. And that is with the CYP19A1 gene. And depending on the speed of that conversion, will help determine, along with the other pathways, if you are estrogen dominant, androgen dominant, co-dominant. Okay, that's what works in there to determine that estrogen, androgen, or co aspect. And that also can help inform you how much estrogen you're working with to how much testosterone at a genetic aspect. And this is where I am going to make a comment about before when I said that hormones are very nuanced. They can be perturbed very easily. And I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Nielsen to talk about a little bit more, with the fact that your DNA is the blueprint that gives you information, definitely. But in the case of hormones, just because you have a particular genetic profile or hormone profile doesn't necessarily mean that is actually what is being presented in blood, in urine, in the saliva that she was talking about in the tests earlier on in this webinar. So let me shift it over to you to discuss that when we are talking about symptoms and how leveraging the DNA, but really looking at the tracking of labs and markers.
So, I think a lot of you've heard about the Women's Health Initiative. And when the Women's Health Initiative was done, the one little spot that was grabbed out of the health initiative was that hormone replacement caused cancer, an increase in cancer. There were a bunch of us who were looking at that go, I didn't get that out of that, but it took us 16 to 20 years to get enough research and to break down all of the flawed research from that Women's Health Initiative to be able to say, hey, no, hormone and hormone levels really help us be healthier. In May of 24, the Journal of Menopause did Medicare records. So women that were 65 up to 85, 95 who had ever been on hormones, whether it was oral hormones, whether it was transdermal, whether it was injectable, whatever the form was at any point in time, they compared their overall health, their overall, what kind of diseases did they have? Did they have cancer? Did they have heart disease? Did they have arthritis? Did they have non-fatty liver disease? And in every case, women who had been on hormones had lesser incidence of chronic disease. And let's think about why. Your body at 30 or 40 has generally very little disease. So when you can optimize your hormones, because hormones are the juice of life, when you can optimize your hormones for a longer period of time, you get more of that good juicy stuff. So what happens when we go through perimenopause and things drop off? The reason we gain that weight is because estrogen has stopped being produced in our ovaries and it's produced in our fat cells. And so the body's going, I need this estrogen that I used to make. I've got to put more fat on because that's where the production comes from. Now, the thing that becomes interesting for us is how can we maintain our lifestyle? How can we maintain our vitality without having all these symptoms and things? One of the things that I wish I had known is when estrogen gets broken down, it breaks down into 3 primary metabolites. And it is 2-hydroxy, it is 4-hydroxy, and it is 16-hydroxy methoxyestradiol. 4-hydroxy is the bad guy. This causes DNA damage. This is when, if a woman's going to metabolize the wrong direction and a woman says, I've been on estrogen, I then got cancer of one form or another, not necessarily breast cancer. Things are being pushed down a toxic pathway. A urine metabolite test, whether it's a Dutch test or a 24-hour urine collection, can tell you the amount of that 4-hydroxy that you're producing and give your provider a heads up. Oops, we're not metabolizing properly. We need to shift, this another direction. 2-hydroxy is actually protective for a woman. And 16-hydroxy is proliferative. What does that mean? It can be proliferative in that if you have, say, fibroids growing, it will cause fibroids to grow more. If you have cysts growing, it will cause cysts to grow more. However, for some of us who've had osteopenia or issues with bone density because you're fair and thin and blonde and Scandinavian and we have all the risk factors, it can actually help us regrow bone. So it decreases the osteoclastic activity, increases the osteoblastic activity. So there are benefits and goods and bads of all of it. If I had understood this, I would have started my bioidentical hormones earlier. Now, do you have to be on bioidenticals? You do not. You can do this with food and lifestyle. One of our partners, Fenmark Community, is all about food and lifestyle and not using either HRT, which is hormone replacement, or BHRT, which is bioidentical hormone replacement. I like the body identical. I like to mimic and mirror what's in my body. But most women don't understand when they take estrogen, if they take it orally, it has to go through the liver twice. The first time it goes through the liver, it is broken down. It becomes water soluble and becomes highly, highly, highly toxic. The second time it goes back through the liver, it then becomes neutralized. And when it becomes neutralized, then it becomes less toxic. Here's the problem. When we're going through perimenopause or menopause and life in general, what do we say? I just got home from a stressful day at work. I don't feel like working out. I want a glass of wine or two or three, you know, and then that liver is struggling because it's spending its energy to detoxify the wine rather than your estrogen. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing that. And then the weight gets more, and then the side effects get more, and then the sleep disturbances get more, all because we're going down the wrong pathway. So again, being able to test, not guess, know your DNA pathways, ask your provider. Sure, you can ask them for serum levels, but at serum levels, you don't know. You know how much is available in the serum, but you don't know which pathway it's going down. I think it should be mandated that at least every 2 years, any woman gets a 24-hour urine or a Dutch test, especially if they're on supplemental hormones. So we see which pathways are we pushing down? Are we pushing down the right pathways, or are we pushing down the wrong pathways? A Dutch test will also show you your stress levels. Look, we have a friend who's coming.
Me too. Dr. Kosterman has her kitties. I have my puppies.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
And so when we see our cortisol getting high, our cortisol also puts weight on us. Our cortisol also is indicative of are we running so fast and so hard we don't put ourselves back in a repair mode, and we end up having added stress to your hormone cycles and your hormone breakdown. So all of this comes back to, we have natural processes. What is either furthering those along or what is impeding those? So when I have someone who says, I can't lose this weight, the first thing that we'll talk about, what does your diet look like? What does your stress look like? What does your sleep patterns look like? What does your energy and movement look like? Each one of those little components, if you imagine like a puzzle, we have to check off that each one of those puzzle pieces are being put in place. Because have you ever seen a skeleton watch? It's one that has the glass on the front and the back, and you can see all the mechanisms all the way through. And you can see all of the cogs working like this, and each cog moves with the other cog. Now, it's interesting. Traditional Western medicine puts you in a box. We have a heart box. We have a uterus box. We have a brain box. We have a lung box. We have a bladder box. Most practitioners deal with somewhere between 2 and 6 inches of the body, and they put blinders on and say, everything outside of this is not in my purview. But what they don't acknowledge is that every system impacts every system. And so we've got to get all of those cogs working together to keep the brain intact, to keep the muscles intact, to keep the hormones intact, to keep the moods intact. And so it's critical to look at each one of those pieces. And if you have one of those pieces out, now you can see in Dr. Varden's glasses, she has an orange tinge in her glasses. So that little orange tinge, if you're not aware, is a blue light blocking lens. Now I have blue light blocking lenses on too. Mine are not the colored ones. Mine, if you look at them, they kind of look rainbowish if you look straight on, but they don't show. But that blocks, so since we spend so much of our time in front of TVs or computers or artificial light, those disrupt our ability to go into an early deep sleep and stay asleep during the night. Tell me, give me a 1 if you have trouble sleeping through the night. If you wish you could sleep better, if you wish you could sleep like a baby and get all the way through the night, put in if you have trouble sleeping through the night, because that is indicative of you needing to, oh yeah, one. Look at all these ones. We got some night owls here, baby. They are up. So if we're going to talk about sleep, you've got to be able to sleep in order to regenerate. You've got to get yourself in that parasympathetic. Do you realize the only time you heal is when you get your body in that parasympathetic mode, which is rest, regenerate, rehabilitate. And if you're not sleeping, then you're always in that fight or flight or that sympathetic mode. So some basic sleep hygiene. You've got to get off these devices an hour or 2 before bed. Getting blue light blocker glasses, even if you don't need a prescription, just get them if you're going to read on something electronic. Get rid of the electronics if you can. Go back to an old-fashioned book or listen to a book on tape or get outside and walk with somebody, whether it's walking a dog, walking a partner, walking by yourself, put on some earplugs, but don't put the EMF earplugs that have the little earbuds. Use buds that have a wire on them, because those have less stimulatory of the brain. We're trying to let the brain have some downtime. Now, here's another trick. Another trick is scent, when we can use your different senses. So we have our eyes that we're going to give them a little bit of a rest. If you have a favorite fragrance, and a lot of people use lavender because it's very relaxing, but I like wood scents. I have cedar and I have frankincense and myrrh and I have umber. I like those candles. Not a Scentsy, that's hormone disrupting. Not a Glade plug-in. Those things are endocrine disruptors. All of those fake scents, okay? I get, regular beeswax candles that have natural essential oils in them. I turn that on. I don't even have to turn it on for long. I have real actual sage. How many of you ever lit sage, saged your house or saged your bed, and then blow it out and just let that wave through. So when your body has that regular scent, it goes, oh, I smell frankincense and myrrh. It's time for bed. If you have a sound, I used to play for my children. I think we played the same cassette tape for almost 10 years. When they'd be anxious and get ready for bed, I'd put on their nighttime tape and they would go to bed. And I figured by 5 or 6, they don't need that anymore. And they'd say, Mommy, where's my music? Mommy, where's my music? Because they had gotten into such a pattern of it told their brain, it's time to shut down. It's time to get quiet. It's time to relax. Now, it's really vital that you start doing cleaning up your nighttime hygiene, because cleaning up that nighttime hygiene will also help all your hormones. And from getting that night's sleep, maybe tonight's not perfect, maybe tomorrow night's not perfect, but when you get up in the morning, you get outside. Now, some people may say it's too cold to get outside. Some people may say it's too hot to get outside. I'm only talking 15 minutes or so. But first thing in the morning, you get outside, you get your glasses off, you get early morning light in your eyes, and it sends a signal into the middle of your brain to your pineal gland. And the pineal gland will make more melatonin at nighttime. We have to get back to these natural cycles of get up when it's light, go to bed when it's dark. And people say, well, I'm a night owl. I get a burst of extra energy. Well, that's your cortisol because of the overstimulation. We are meant to go to bed when it's dark. We are meant to wake up when it's light. And I will encourage you, unless you're a night worker, and we could go into a whole nother thing about that, but to try to go to bed a little bit earlier, go to bed a little bit earlier. And there are things that you can use, whether magnolia is one, whether melatonin. A lot of people think there was some old literature that said, don't use more than 1 milligram or 2 of melatonin. Well, the newest literature doesn't show that, because what they were saying is if you take it, your body will stop producing it. They've now found that's false. Just like they found that the Women's Health Initiative, there was some misinformation that media gabbled up. The same thing with the melatonin. You still will produce melatonin. We're having less and less melatonin because of all this blue light and overstimulation. They're now using up to 100 milligrams of melatonin in Alzheimer's patients to get their brains back. So if you have to use 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams or 20 milligrams, it is okay. But if you're not working with a practitioner who's helping you sleep, that is a great first step, because sleeping always, if you've got a good night's sleep, if you don't have to go to work next morning, if you've had a day where off and you're like, oh, I slept so well because I wasn't worried about getting up. Imagine if you started doing more of that on a more consistent basis, how much better everything else is going to be. So I could keep going, but I'll give it a break. Started me on a roll, girl.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's fantastic information, and you know how much of a proponent I am for good quality sleep.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that can be done to help tweak and set up good sleep hygiene for yourself to have a good night's sleep. Because there could be some things that you're not doing, like making sure that your room is a colder temperature, making sure that your room is completely dark, that you are shutting down all devices, and maybe even turning off your Wi-Fi at night. Again, there are so many things that you can do with sleep hygiene, even the difference between sleeping in pajamas and sleeping naked, or the type of sheets that you are using, or the type of mattress you are sleeping on. All of these things make a difference. But are you doing them?
It's so funny you should say that, because we only use cotton sheets, and I use organic cotton sheets, and I use no fragrance, no anything, detergent, but I do put a couple drops of essential oil in so that they smell wonderful. My frankincense and myrrh again. I went to a hotel because we went to a friend's wedding, and they had polyester sheets. Now they were these super soft. I mean, when you touched them, you're like, oh, these are divine. And they felt like whipped egg whites. I mean, they're fabulous. I could not sleep. Oh my gosh, it disrupted my energy. I was so hot. It was just like all night I'm throwing a leg out, throwing it back, throwing a leg out. And I was like, what is wrong with this? And then I pulled up the next morning and looked at the label, and I found out they were all synthetic. And it was like, it totally energetically disrupted everything in my body. It was crazy.
Well, and you consider what they use to wash those sheets and the cleaning products that they use to clean the rooms. I mean, you are being inundated by a lot of toxic chemicals. So yeah, you just start piling that on top of, I honestly, my sleep is disrupted when I stay at hotels. So yeah, right there with you. And I also noticed in the chat, by the way, if you have questions, please don't put them in the chat, put them in our Q&A, and we will make sure to get to them, because I'm seeing some great questions, but I want to make sure that they do get addressed in our Q&A. So I wanted to throw that out before we continued. So we've talked about sleep. We've talked about some foods, but I really would like to get into a few more things
Mhm.
on diet and nutritional support because one of the in the question in the poll that our audience was concerned about was that extra weight gain, was having to deal with these that side effect of going through menopause. So what kinds of things would you recommend considering diet, nutritional support, genetics, and going through menopause with this unwanted weight gain when possibly nothing has changed? It's just like all of a sudden it's just piling on.
Mhm. Well, I can tell you for me and for a lot of my clients, there were a few key things. One, you've got to really keep a food journal. Keep a food journal for 4 to 7 days. And there's no judgment here. It is anything and everything that goes in your mouth. The reason that we want to do that is we want to look for hidden sugars because sugar spikes your metabolism. And if you don't know it, insulin is a storage hormone. It's going to grab that sugar and say, oh, I don't need this right now. I'm going to pack it away. So there is a lot of hidden sugar in a lot of sauces, in a lot of bottled dressings. So you're eating all these salads, but you're eating bottled salad dressings. There's sugars in there. Your gummies, I'm see as a pharmacist, I go and see, and like the
Mhm.
nutrition section is now full of all these gummies that is all sugar.
Yeah.
Because people say, well, I don't like the taste of swallowing a liquid, and can't swallow pills, so I'll just take a gummy. Isn't that doing something for me? Yeah, but it's not necessarily the thing that you want to be having done for you. So um, I have found certain supplements that really help. One is creatine. Creatine, when you are moving your muscles, helps gain muscle mass. Now, I think the biggest bag of baloney that we've been sold is the scale, the weight scale. And I fall to it too. Okay. So if I gain 2 pounds, oh my gosh, I gained 2 pounds. You want to measure your muscle mass versus your fat mass. It is what's important is go to a gym or go to your doctor or go somewhere where you can see, do I have 25% body fat? Do I have 35% body fat? Do I have 45% body fat? That's where you're going to know your muscle to your fat ratio. The more muscle you have, the more you will burn. How do we build muscle? We have to stress and tax those muscles. Creatine will help you build muscle mass faster and help you burn off that extra fat. The second thing that I have found is stabilizing your blood sugar. And I'm just going to say this, the most important thing you need to know is when you go to your basic doctor and you once or twice a year you get your blood work, you want ideally your fasting glucose to be in that 85 to 95 range. What do they say? Oh, you were 101. Oh, you were 113. Oh, you're in that pre-diabetic zone. Guys, I'm going to tell you, there is no pre-diabetic. It's like pregnancy. You either are or you aren't. Now, you might be at the beginning stages where it's reversible, but you've got to know that as soon as you blow out your insulin and your insulin becomes resistant, you are aging faster than you need to. I want you to picture this real quickly. You've got a glass full of water and you mix 11 teaspoons of sugar in it. Now you've got sugar water, and this is what people would do for, like, say, for hummingbird feeders. If you set it out and it evaporates, what's left? All of those sugar crystals. Every time you have a Coke, every time you have bread, every time you have a high carb meal, macaroni and cheese, all of that starch breaks down to sugar. All those sugars are coating your eyes, and we call it cataracts. It's coating your joints, and we call it arthritis. It's coating all of your organs. I want you to think of your heart and your liver and everything like ground glass is in there. It's called glycation. When that dried sugar is in there rubbing and it wears it out. Can you imagine what happens if you put sugar in your gas tank of your car? Your car doesn't run. Every time you're putting high sugar into your body, you are furthering the breakdown. And especially in perimenopause and menopause, we become extremely insulin resistant. We've got to get that insulin sensitivity back. Now, am I saying that you've got to eliminate it forever? No. But I'm saying, how do you know that those levels are staying low? How do you know how a food is impacting you? We now have, the little monitors that you've seen. You can either use the finger sticks or you can see the monitors. The finger sticks, a glucose monitor might be $25, a 25 or 50 test strips might be 25 or 50. So for about $50, you can be doing the finger sticks. Now, a lot of people say, I don't like needles, I don't want to do that. So you can do a glucose monitor. They run anywhere, and you can get them over the counter now. They run anywhere from $50 to $90 a month, but you get 24/7 of your glucose monitoring. Here's the thing. I wore it because my mother has had diabetes for 40 years, and they was about ready to put her on insulin. And I'm like, come on, Mom, we can do this with your diet. She's in her 80s. And she said, well, I try. Well, we put one of these CGMs on her, and we went down, and we're both gluten-free. We went down and had a half a gluten-free sandwich, and we had a half a salad with some dressing on it. My blood sugar went up to 150. Mine runs normally 90 to maybe 100. And it went up to 150. Shocked, blew my mind. I'm like, well, that didn't work for me. My mother's went up to 200. She started at 130 and it went to 200. Mine was back down within an hour because I have more insulin sensitivity. It took Mom 6 hours to recover after 40 years of diabetes. So my insulin was more sensitive than her insulin. Mine didn't respond as high, but it gobbled it up quickly. I in better control in my 60s because I watched that. Now, so you can go to your doctor and get your fasting glucose. What you may have to ask for, or you may have to ask them to order separately, is your fasting insulin. It can also be called free insulin. If you look at your free insulin, that will show you if you have a number of 1, 2, 3, 4, you're fine. But if you're free insulin, all that insulin that's around gobbling all that up and putting that weight on is a 16, you're in trouble, girlfriend. And then you know where to focus. That's why I so believe in test, don't guess. That's why I so believe, know your patterns, know your hormones, know your metabolites. I would rather most of us are on high deductible insurance plans. Why? We have $2,000, $3,000, some of us $6,000. I'd rather you use, your HSA card or $1,000 or $2,000 worth of preventative checking and going, hey, what does my insulin look like? Hey, what is my insulin sensitivity saying? Hey, what is my DNA likelihood? Hey, what are my metabolites if I'm actually going to go on BHRT, or if I'm on HRT, where are they going down? You'll get 10 times more data, 10 times more ability to control your health and go, hey, this is working. So when I couldn't sleep, took a little melatonin, that didn't work. Then I had to layer magnesium glycinate. Oh, changed my world, magnesium glycinate. Then I did a little glycine. Glycine turns into GABA. GABA helps relax the body, lowers the cortisol. If you wake up in the middle of the night, one, your liver could be processing and having problems. I go back, if you wake up between 1 and 3 in the morning, I go back and check your liver. Okay. If you're waking up, you could be having a cortisol response. We've got to get that cortisol down. I use ashwagandha, I use rhodiola. So all of these things, when you're working with a practitioner that understands hormones, and there are some great groups out there, whether you work with somebody within the DNA company, there are women's groups now that are doing telemedicine that are really helpful. And there are companies like MIRA, that do hormone testing regularly. Now, a lot of times they're known for fertility and ovulation, but there's insulin resistance again with PCOS. A lot of young women are struggling with their fertility because of their insulin resistance. The more insulin resistant you are going into menopause, the tougher your symptoms are going to be. If I said one thing tonight that you've got to get a hold of, it's your metabolism. It's your insulin sensitivity.
Yes.
You know, you've got to figure out where you are, where you're going to be, and what do I have to change? I used to say, oh, well, I eat really well. I eat protein and greens, and I leave all the other stuff. I don't eat grains except for maybe special occasions like a birthday or, you know, a holiday. But those exceptions I can count on one hand in a year, and not every day is an exception. And I'd say, well, I walk 2 to 5 miles every day. Well, guess what? Walking is great, but it doesn't build muscle mass. So now I do 20 to 30 minutes every day, except Sunday. I take Sunday off, of some time of either calisthenics. And you don't have to join a gym. You can do push-ups, you can do sit-ups, you can do squats, you can do lunges, you can do, if you will do 30 seconds of lunges on one leg and then 30 seconds of lunges on another leg and then take a minute break and repeat it again and again and again, guess what? If you hang, this is going to sound silly. You hang from a hanging bar, you will not believe how hard it is to hang. And you know, the whole goal is to hold it for a minute. How many of you remember when we used to have the Presidential Physical Fitness Awards and we pushed through those? They got rid of those. Why? Because the kids were not making it. Well, they're bringing them back. We have got to get back because 74% of the kids out there don't qualify to serve in the military because they are not physically fit. If we're going to have strong, long lives, we've got to be physically fit. We've got to have a younger generation be physically fit if we're going to have somebody to take care of us. Okay.
Yeah.
And so go.
I wanted to mention that speaking of exercise, there was a study that we were looking at. It's called Exercise Training Reduces the Frequency of Menopausal Hot Flashes. And this study found that regular resistance and aerobic training can actually cut hot flashes in half. These improvements were linked to better thermoregulatory control, lower core temperature, earlier sweating onset, and increased skin blood flow. So ultimately really helping the body to manage heat more effectively. So in the study, before the training, which they did for 16 weeks, the women reported approximately having 100 hot flashes per week. After that training, frequency dropped to about 52 per week. Again, having the symptoms of those hot flashes. So really, it is not just in building that lean muscle mass, which is directly related to longevity, health, you know, helping to make your body more insulin sensitive for weight loss, etc. But it really helps with the symptoms as we are transitioning, upgrading, you know, into menopause, because lifestyle is one of the most powerful levers during menopause, from diet to exercise, stress management, even small, consistent changes, just like Dr. Nielsen was saying. Do some sit-ups, do some, you know, even holding plank, the plank pose. You see how long you can do that? Because I'll tell you, it really works those core muscles. You
Even
bet.
pushing against the wall. If you can't
Yes.
do a push-up, if you can't get on your knees and do a push-up, I want you to go to a wall, push against the wall, put your feet back, and then kind of lean in at like a 45-degree angle. And you can do them from there. You can start getting some muscles there. When you talk about little bit of exercise, there was a recent study that came out that showed people who, they had 3 groups. People who exercise for an hour in the morning, how was their blood sugar? How was their insulin sensitivity? People who exercised an hour after work, hour in the evening before they went to sleep, how was their insulin sensitivity? And people who did not exercise for an hour, but instead got up and walked for 1 to 2 minutes every 30 minutes to an hour. Which group do you think got the best blood numbers and got the best insulin sensitivity?
I know.
The
was
ones
people who
that got
walked.
up and walked and
Yeah.
a minute or two. It wasn't an hour walk, guys. It was walk around your house. It was walk up and down your stairs 2 or 3 times. If you will do that every 30 minutes to an hour, you pump that sugar out of your blood. You get that pumped into your cells, you're burning calories, you're waking up your body's ability to clear, and your symptoms will go down. You know what? Your weight will stabilize. Your ability to metabolize will improve. They're little things. And I know sometimes it seems like we say the same thing again and again, but it's why? Because it works.
Yeah. Like again, even those small but consistent changes, and that's the key, they can influence hormone balance, reduce your symptoms, and even improve your long-term health. And that really goes to proving that you have more control over this transitional upgrade than you might think.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to those who said, I feel like this is just happening to me. I don't know what's going on. Now 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 you can put yourself back in the driver's seat on this. So we have a bunch of questions that I
We should get to them.
definitely, yes, absolutely. Now, I do want to say that for those of you, because I did kind of look through some of these questions that have specific uh, questions about yours or a family member's issues, we are not allowed to give medical advice. Okay. And we can't speak on that because we don't know the full background, but we can give general insights and comments that can be helpful. So I wanted to put that out there.
And that you can take back to your prescriber and say,
Yes.
"Hey, have you considered or do you know about?"
Okay. And actually going through some of these questions, I noticed that due to you being a pharmacist, that you would be better to answer some of these. So like the
Sure.
first one, Susan is asking, what are the names of base creams for topical BHRT that are clean and without petroleum-based ingredients or other ingredients that might not be tolerated by someone who is sensitive? Are you
So
familiar with any?
I am. So Susan, what I
Perfect.
would do is I would talk to a compounding pharmacy. Depends on where you want to get it filled, but there are a number of compounding pharmacies that will use coconut oil, they'll use cocoa butter, they'll use non-petroleum based, and all you have to do is tell them, look, I want, something natural like a tallow, and they are generally real open to that, so that it doesn't have to be a petroleum-based product. But you just tell them, I don't react well to that. I'm skin sensitive. Oftentimes, the best thing to say is I have an allergy and I have chronic skin irritation. So I need the most natural. What do you have available? There are so many of them that I can't really list a brand for you, but talk to your compounding pharmacist because they will know what they have available and then how they can help you and support you. But it'll probably have to be compounding pharmacist.
Excellent. Okay, so Sue is mentioning that she went through menopause at 50. Her daughter's now 51, not having any symptoms, and her daughter's on birth control. Okay, so she's taking exogenous hormones and not having any periods, much less symptoms. And really, I think overall it's going, hey, if someone is on birth control, how does this look for them further down the road? How safe is it to stay on birth control, as they are moving through this transitional stage?
So what I would say to that is progesterone is very different than progestin. Progesterone is what our body normally has, and that is body similar. Progestin is not body similar. And so I don't like the synthetics because the body doesn't always know what to do with synthetics. If she needs to be on something now because she's concerned about fertility, I would look at doing some of the fertility tests like the Mira for $259, I think it is. You can run the Mira test and see if she's ovulating or see if she's having a problem. She could also use an IUD that is progestin only, but I would not use synthetic estrogen the more you get into menopause, because we want to use as closely to biosimilar as possible.
Thank you for that. So there's another question about HRT. Whether if there's no real concerns, they're not having any major symptoms, should HRT or BHRT still be considered? Because, as that person's going through menopause, and this can be anyone, obviously, our estrogen, our hormones get very low. Okay. And it's shown on a Dutch test. So even though they're not having symptoms, why should they consider HRT or
Well,
BHRT?
we tend to go downhill slower than we realize. Some people crash, some people just slowly run out of gas. One of the current philosophies in the hormone community is by maintaining those, it might just be just above the postmenopausal level, but by maintaining it just above that, you're kind of showing your body, hey, I'm really more in my 40s, I'm really more in my 50s, I'm not really in my 60s. So like you, I'm in my 60s, but I don't look like I'm 60. I don't act like I'm 60. None of my blood numbers look like a typical 60-year-old. And if you look again at that Journal of Menopause, May of 2024, long term, what we found was anywhere from half to 10 to 1 times there were fewer long-term health issues. So like if 100,000 women who'd been on estrogen or BHRT or any HRT had high cholesterol, 1,000,000 or 1,000,001 that weren't on HRT had high cholesterol. Now let's think about this. Why would that be? Cholesterol is actually an antioxidant. Cholesterol is produced to produce your hormones. Cholesterol is produced to repair your skin. So if you're on a small dose, just enough that might give you a little extra zip or zow or keep your tissues fresh, keep your skin tight, then the likelihood of your cholesterol going crazy and then having some prescribers say, well, you've got to be on cholesterol medicine down. The cholesterol your body is producing is trying to help you. But if you've got a little bit of that HRT going on, then that cholesterol will stay down and then everybody's happy with their box. So I am a big advocate for HRT and BHRT. And your provider as a naturopath is saying, try it. You're not married to it. If you try it for 3 months or 6 months and say, I don't feel good on this, then great, then don't. And there's a lot of women that don't want to be on it. Again, you can look at one of our partners, the FemMar group, and they have certain foods that they recommend that will naturally augment phytoestrogens to give you a little bit of that lift. And that may be something you prefer. So one, it's an individual preference. Don't let anybody push you in. Two, baby, I'm going to hold on as long as I can and feel as spicy as I can for as long as I can. And for me, it is the right decision, and I'm very happy with it because I know my genetics, because I monitor my labs, and because I like having bit vigor and vitality. I like sleeping again. Progesterone at night helps me sleep fabulously. I will do 7 to 8 hours, wake up naturally and refreshed. And what a nice change that is.
Yeah. And again, knowing your levels are really important. And that's the test, don't guess. So, I've noticed some questions in here about the Dutch test. So that's a dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. There's actually two different tests, a Dutch complete, which is the most common and comprehensive panel. That's going to test like your sex hormones, androgens, cortisol and cortisone, melatonin, organic acids, nutritional markers, oxidative stress. Then there's the Dutch Plus. That includes everything in the Dutch Complete, plus saliva measurements for cortisol awakening response. So it really just dives deeper, gives a bit more insight into that HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. If there's any dysfunction, looks at stress response, etc.
Now they have added
Yeah.
sex hormones only. So if you've gotten a Dutch Complete or a Dutch Plus and you found you were super low or things were out of whack, you can go back and just do the little segment on the sex hormones, and it's less expensive. And like in 3 or 4 months after you've worked with your prescriber to go, oh, do I need some DIM, or oh, do I need some chlorophane, or oh, do I need to stop drinking, or whatever it is, then you can get that little segment too. They've done it. And that was really great that somebody didn't have to do the whole thing over again.
Yeah. And as far as primary care physicians ordering these types of tests, what I have found is that it depends on if they're open to it. If they don't know about it, are not comfortable, good luck trying to get them to order it. Usually it's a functional medicine doctor, naturopath, or someone who has awareness about the test, and uses it in their practice.
You really
So
want somebody who's trained on
yeah.
it because it is
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
intricate. We're trained here at the DNA company because one, we're
Yes.
women and we like it. But whether you look at a health coach that might just do that for you, or whether you look at having an episodic visit with someone like Dr. Vardner, myself, that is trained in it and understands the DNA and the Dutch testing, can put together in one session for you, looking at and seeing what we see that's beyond just the obvious. That's always an option.
So there's a question about vaginal atrophy. So painful intercourse, vaginal dryness, things like that. And do you know of any application or anything that can be done that doesn't use estrogen?
Well, you can use soy-based creams because the soy has phytoestrogens. You can use natural lubricants like coconut oil or like tallow. Tallow is a beef fat, but it mimics the lipids in skin mucosa. So those are things that can be used as lubricants that can really assist, that are natural, that are non-toxic, and that are really helpful for lubrication should you need that. There's also a product called Meno. It's in a little blue container that has a lot of different herbs. I know it has some maca, some aloe, and a couple things, and it actually is strictly produced to increase lubrication. And I've actually seen it work really well. And it's by something one is the name of the company. I'm blanking right now, but it's called Meno, and Target carries it, Walmart carries it. So you may look at that for vaginal lubrication naturally.
So we only have a couple more minutes, but I noticed one of the questions was asking about wearing glasses or contacts in the morning, being fine if it blocks, if all it blocks is UV light, and is the reason for recommending not wearing glasses due to the fact that many glasses and contacts can block blue light. Because they're saying, hey, well, don't we not want to have that UV exposure in the eyes due to risk of cataracts? And I'm going to mention that when Dr. Nielsen was saying about going outside 10 or 15 minutes, get some sun in your face, in the eyes, it doesn't mean that you're staring into the sun. Okay. But just having those photons, the frequencies, the rays of the sun, of that light, is very important. And do that without the glasses. It's not like you have to see clarity of, the leaves and stuff. You want to do it just bare eyes. And I'm going to give you a little sneak peek here of a podcast, a 2-part podcast that I did with Dr. Jacob Lieberman. He wonderful, brilliant pioneer in vision, light, consciousness. He's written 4 books. One, Light Medicine of the Future, back in the early 90s. His most recent book, Luminous Life. He also wrote Take Off Your Glasses and See. He really gets into why light is so important without the glasses, especially when you're outside in the morning and resetting that circadian rhythm. So you can definitely look him up, take a look at his books, and definitely keep an eye out for when those podcasts become live. I think you'll really enjoy those. So with that, there were some other great little questions, but unfortunately we have run out of time.
However, I'm sure we
yes.
can put a note. If you have questions, powers that be, can you put in like Gabby's email or one of the other intake people, and they can get those questions answered for you. I know that we have, sometimes people go, oh my gosh, my question didn't get answered, but the company will put the name of whether it's one of our fabulous trainees that's coming in, and they can help get that answer for you. So I don't know if Vanny, if you can put that in, or if Katie, you can put that in, an email that they can use, whether it's concierge at the DNA company or CEO at the DNA. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. CEO perfect. At the DNA company. So if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to shoot a question and we'll get somebody to get an answer back to you so that you can feel good about that. And, we would love to see you on more of these. We would love to help you get through your DNA test, use our DNA Way app, come back to Beyond These. I mean, there's just so many great things that we're adding. Be on one of our summits. It's just so important that you take charge of your health and become an advocate so that you can be getting the most out of all the resources that are available and be the best you can be.
Yeah, because our next She Summit, which is coming up October 25th, is going to be focused on breast cancer, which actually the rates of breast cancer increase during and after menopause. So definitely something to look for, sign up for, and attend. So with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nielsen, for being here and all the glorious information you have shared. I always enjoy, co-hosting with you, just incredible experience that you share. I really, really enjoy that. And I want to say thank you, everyone, for attending tonight, for taking the time out to be here to learn. And we hope that you are walking away from this webinar feeling more empowered, feeling more educated, so that way you don't feel a victim to this transitional upgrade in your life, that you actually are in control and that you can make small, consistent changes to make the difference in your life. Thank you. And
thank you, Dr. Varden. Thank you at the next one. And thanks all of you. You make it so worth being here. We love you.
Yes.
Have a good night.
We'll dance out.